Ambassador Taehyun Park stood before the Galactic Confederation Council, his weathered face illuminated by the blue glow of the central podium. Representatives from 87 spacefaring civilizations watched with varying degrees of interest as the human diplomat cleared his throat. Honored representatives, I must emphasize again the importance of respecting territorial boundaries established in our accession treaty, Taehyun said, his voice steady despite the dismissive clicks and whistles from the Raxian delegation. Councillor Grek, a towering arthropoid with gleaming carapace decorations, denoting his high military rank, waved a limb dismissively. The human ambassador continues these tiresome warnings. Their species has barely mastered basic FTL travel, yet they speak as if they command respect. From her seat in the observer section, Dr. Ju Kim, Earth's foremost sinoanthropologist, exchanged worried glances with Colonel Do-Yim Lee. The military attache's expression remained neutral, but Ju noted how his fingers tightened around his datapad. Our historical records show what happens when our species is cornered or attacked unjustly. Taehyun continued, undeterred. For the mutual prosperity of all Confederation members, we strongly advise. We have heard enough primitive posturing, interrupted Councillor Meravax of the Ordani Imperium, her crystalline form shimmering with irritation. This council has more pressing matters than entertaining the paranoia of newcomers. As the council moved to the next agenda item, Do-Yim leaned toward Juwoo. They're not listening, he whispered. They never do, she replied. Not until it's too late. After the meeting, Taehyun met with his team in the small room assigned to Earth's delegation. The space was plain compared to the grand chambers of older Confederation members, but it served their needs. Maps of human space glowed on the walls, showing their modest territory among the stars. They think we are weak, said Taehyun, removing his formal collar. That is dangerous for everyone. Jumu pulled up data on her screen. My research shows 17 historical cases where human civilizations were underestimated by invaders. In 15 cases, it ended in total defeat for the aggressors. The problem, said Do-Yun, is that we cannot explain our history in terms they understand. Our wars, our ability to adapt, our response to threats. It follows patterns unique to Earth. Hana Yoon, the youngest member of the delegation and their communications specialist, looked up from her notes. I've been monitoring Confederation channels. The Ordani and Raxians are sending more scout ships to our borders. They call it standard procedure, but the frequency has tripled in the last month. Taehyun sighed. They see Earth as a resource to be claimed, not a civilization to be respected. The team worked late into the night, preparing another presentation for the council. Do-Yum brought in military reports showing unusual activity near the colony of New Busan, while Juwoo compiled more data on human psychology under threat. Early the next morning, Taehyun was called to a private meeting with the Confederation's senior administrator, Vexilor, a being from one of the oldest species in the galaxy. The ancient alien skin was pale blue, with eyes that had seen millennia of galactic politics. Ambassador Park, said Vexilor, his translator producing perfect human speech. I requested this meeting because I am concerned. About what, Administrator? Asked Taehyun. I have lived long enough to recognize patterns. The Ordani and Raxians are forming a coalition with several smaller powers. They speak of resource security and preemptive measures. Taehyun felt his heart rate increase. You mean they plan to attack Earth? Not Earth itself, perhaps, but your outer colonies. Yes, I believe that is their intention. Your world possesses something rare in our galaxy. What is that? Liquid water in abundance, diverse biospheres, and strategic metals that are increasingly scarce in developed systems. Taehyun leaned forward. Then you understand our warnings. Vexilor's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. I am old, Ambassador. I have seen species rise and fall. Most follow predictable patterns when threatened. But there are legends, tales of civilizations that responded to aggression with such transformation that they became something new entirely. And you think humans might be such a species? I cannot say, but I advise caution to all parties. The Confederation has survived for 20,000 years through balance, not domination. When Taehyun returned to the Earth delegation's quarters, he found Hannah looking pale. "Sir, we've lost contact with Observation Post Delta near the Raxian border," she said, and 3 merchant ships failed to make their scheduled jumps. Do-hyun was already pulling up defense protocols on his screen. Could be a communication glitch. For all 3 ships and a military outpost. Ju shook her head. The probability of that is essentially 0. Taehyun made a decision. Send a message to Earth Command. Raise our alert status and begin evacuating civilian populations from border colonies, and request an emergency session of the Council. 2 hours later, the news arrived. New Busan colony was under attack. First reports showed massive casualties as Ordani warships targeted habitat domes. The colony's small defense force was overwhelmed within minutes. In the emergency council session, chaos erupted as reports of attacks on 3 human colonies came in simultaneously. The Raxian and Ordani representatives declared that they were simply securing potentially hostile territories as a preventive security measure. Taehyun stood at the podium, his face now a mask of cold fury rather than diplomatic patience. "You were warned," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "Humanity extended its hand in peace, and you responded with violence against civilians. Your colonies posed a strategic threat," began the Raxian representative. "They were farming communities and research stations." Taehyun cut in. "With minimal defenses that you easily overwhelmed. You have made a fundamental error in judgment." "And what would that be?" sneered Councillor Marivax. "Throughout our history, humans have repeatedly demonstrated one consistent trait. When threatened, we do not cower or surrender. We transform. You think you understand war because you have fought limited conflicts over resources and borders. Humanity was born in conflict. It shaped our evolution, our psychology, our very DNA." The chamber grew quiet as Taehyun continued. "I am officially notifying this council that as of this moment, all diplomatic relations between Earth and the aggressors are severed. What comes next is on your heads." As Taehyun and his team left the chamber for the last time, Vexlor approached them. "I am sorry, Ambassador. I had hoped to prevent this." "As did we," said Taehyun. "But now it is too late for words." "What will humanity do?" asked the ancient alien. Do-hyun answered before Taehyun could. "What we have always done when cornered. We will fight. And we will win." As their ship broke orbit, heading for Earth, they received the first reports of the human response. The Scorched Earth Directive had been activated. All of humanity was now on war footing. The galaxy was about to learn why you never enrage humanity. The orbital defense station above New Busan colony transmitted for exactly 9 seconds before going silent. The message, fragmented and distorted, showed Commander Subin Kang shouting orders as the background erupted in flames. On Earth, the Emergency Response Center in Geneva plunged into controlled chaos. Fleet Admiral Jae-hyun Choi stared at the holographic display as red indicators bloomed across human space. New Busan, Harmony Point, Armstrong Station, all under simultaneous attack. "Status of the Fifth Fleet," he demanded. General Minji-ryu's face appeared on a side screen, her standard composure cracking. "Taking heavy losses, sir. The Ordani shields are. We've never seen anything like them. And the Raxians brought 3 dreadnoughts. Civilian casualties." Minji's jaw tightened. Initial estimates exceed 2 million. They targeted the habitat domes first. The room fell silent as the gravity of the situation sank in. "They expect us to surrender," Jae-hyun said, his voice dangerously quiet. "They believe this show of force will bring us to our knees." President Hyunju Park entered the command center, her eyes hard as steel. "Admiral, initiate Protocol Omega-9. Jae-hyun's head snapped up. "Madam President, FATS." "I know exactly what it is," she interrupted. "The Scorched Earth Directive is hereby activated. Effective immediately, Earth stands at total war status." She turned to the communications officer. "Cut all diplomatic channels with the Confederation. They ignored our warnings. Now they'll learn why that was a mistake." The attack had been swift and brutal. New Busan, humanity's most developed colony with a population of 3 million, was hit first. The Ordani ships targeted life support systems and habitat domes, causing catastrophic decompression. Those who didn't die from explosive decompression suffocated in the thin Martian atmosphere. In orbit around Earth, the military space station Aegis Prime became the nerve center of humanity's response. Captain Junho Kim watched the incoming data streams with growing horror. The enemy had struck with precision, targeting communication relays first to isolate each colony before the main assault. "Sir," called out Lieutenant Sumi Park from her station, "we have survivors from Harmony Point. A transport ship managed to jump before the Raxians destroyed the spaceport. 200 civilians, mostly children from the education center." Junho nodded grimly. "Direct them to Luna Base. It's the most secure location we have right now." On the main view screen, footage from Armstrong Station showed Raxian ground troops moving through the corridors. The alien soldiers were tall, insectoid beings with 4 arms, each carrying energy weapons that cut through the station's security personnel with ease. "They're taking prisoners," noted Tactical Officer Dae-Yeon Cho. "But only scientists and engineers. Everyone else is being eliminated." Back in Geneva, President Park stood before the United Earth government in emergency session. Representatives from every nation watched in stunned silence as she detailed the attacks. "Make no mistake," she said, her voice firm. "This is not a border dispute or resource grab. This is an existential threat to our species. The coalition forces have demonstrated their intent by targeting civilians first. They seek to terrorize us into submission." In the command center below, Admiral Jae-hyun reviewed the activation protocols for Omega-9. The plan had been created 50 years ago, when humanity first discovered they weren't alone in the universe. It was a contingency that most considered unthinkable, the complete conversion of Earth's economy and society to a war footing. "Begin the evacuation of all non-essential personnel from the outer colonies," he ordered. "Any ship that can fly is to be used. Priority to children and medical cases." General Minji coordinated the defense forces from her position near Jupiter. The Fifth Fleet, humanity's most advanced battle group, had been caught off guard, but was regrouping quickly. "The Ordani have better shields, but their drive systems are slower," she told her captains. "Use hit-and-run tactics. Don't engage in prolonged firefights." The human ships, though outnumbered and outgunned, fought with desperate courage. The EDF Indomitable, a cruiser under Captain Ji-hoon Lee, managed to destroy 2 Raxian destroyers before being crippled. As his ship vented atmosphere from multiple hull breaches, Ji-hoon made a decision that would later be studied in military academies. "All power to engines," he ordered. "Plot a collision course with their command ship." His bridge crew looked at him in shock, but followed orders. The Indomitable, trailing debris and fire, accelerated directly toward the Raxian flagship. At the last moment, Ji-hoon activated the experimental jump drive while still inside the gravity well of the gas giant, a maneuver considered suicidal. The resulting space-time distortion tore apart both ships and created a temporary singularity that swallowed 3 more enemy vessels. Back on Earth, the first waves of refugees began arriving from the colonies. Hospitals filled with the injured while emergency shelters struggled to accommodate those who'd lost everything. News of the attack spread, and with it came something the alien coalition hadn't anticipated: rage. In factories across the planet, production lines that had been making consumer goods were rapidly retooled for war materials. Universities turned their research facilities toward military applications. Retired soldiers and pilots reported for duty without being called. President Park addressed the population from an underground bunker, her message broadcast worldwide. Citizens of Earth, we face the greatest threat in human history. Our enemies believe they know us, that they can predict our response. They are wrong. Throughout our long and often bloody history, humanity has shown one consistent trait: we do not accept defeat. She paused, her expression resolute. I have activated the Scorched Earth Directive. From this moment, Earth exists on a war footing. All industries will be directed toward defense and counter-offensive capabilities. All scientific research will focus on military applications. All diplomatic efforts with the aggressors cease. Across the planet, the transformation began. In Seoul, the massive shipyards that had built luxury space yachts now hummed with activity as workers constructed military vessels. In Nairobi, the Quantum Computing Center redirected its entire capacity to breaking enemy communication codes. In Rio de Janeiro, the bioscience complex that had been developing cures for diseases now worked on understanding alien physiology and how to exploit it. Admiral Jae-hyun received the first intelligence reports from agents embedded in Confederation space. The Raxians and Ordani were celebrating their victory, believing that humans would sue for peace within days. They don't understand us at all, he told his staff. They think this massive first strike will break our will to fight. General Minji, her face grim on the view screen, nodded. They studied our technology, our military capabilities, our resource levels. But they never studied our history. Or they did, but didn't believe it, added Intelligence Director Hannah Yoon. The concept of a species that grows stronger when attacked seems counterintuitive to them. President Park joined the briefing, the weight of 2 million dead citizens heavy on her shoulders. How long until we can strike back? Admiral Jae-hyun consulted his data. 6 months at minimum. We need to develop countermeasures for their shield technology and build enough ships to matter. The president nodded. Then we have 6 months to become something they cannot imagine. 6 months to show them why. Throughout our history, cornering humans has always been a fatal mistake. As the meeting ended, alerts came in. The enemy fleet was advancing toward Mars, having secured the outer colonies. Earth would be next. The first battle was lost. But the war was just beginning. 3 months after the first strike, the orbital shipyards above Mars hummed with activity that would have been unimaginable before the war. What had once been civilian manufacturing platforms now produced vessels of war at a pace that confounded Confederation intelligence. Dr. Kyung-ho Yoon, formerly Earth's leading researcher in clean energy, now stood in his transformed laboratory beneath the lunar surface. Around him, dozens of scientists worked frantically on projects that would have horrified their peacetime selves. The adaptive shield modulation is holding at 98% efficiency, reported his assistant, Dr. Suman Kang. The Ordani weapons can no longer penetrate our frontline destroyers. Kyung-ho nodded, studying the simulation results. And the reverse-engineered gravity lance. Ready for field deployment. Engineering says we can retrofit the entire fleet within 2 weeks. On the main production floor of what had once been Hyundai Orbital Industries, now the primary military manufacturing center for the Asian Coalition, CEO Jimin Park observed the assembly line with grim satisfaction. Thousands of workers operated in perfect coordination, building weapons that had existed only in theoretical papers before the war. Another production record today, noted Director Yuna Lee, checking her tablet. We've exceeded projected output by 40%. Jimin nodded, watching the workers, many who had lost family in the colonies. Humanity has always excelled at one thing throughout our bloody history. What's that? Adapting to make war, he replied. The Confederation is about to learn that lesson. The Mars shipyards had once built luxury cruise vessels and scientific exploration ships. Now they constructed warships day and night. The red planet glowed with the light of fusion torches and assembly bays. Earth had transformed itself in ways the enemy never expected. Colonel Min-ho Kang walked through the newest vessel in Earth's growing fleet. The EDF Retribution was unlike any ship humanity had built before. Its sleek black hull absorbed sensor scans instead of reflecting them. Its weapon systems were adapted from Ordani technology, captured in early skirmishes. Time to completion, he asked the shipyard supervisor, Yunji Han. 72 hours, she replied, her eyes tired but determined. We're working triple shifts. This ship wasn't even on the drawing board 3 months ago, Minho said, marveling at the speed of development. Yunji nodded. That's the difference between us and them. They build according to centuries-old designs. We adapt and improvise. In a secure facility beneath the Pacific Ocean, Admiral Jae-hyun reviewed the latest intelligence with his war council. The holographic display showed enemy fleet movements and supply lines across Confederation space. Their advance has stalled, noted General Minji. They expected us to collapse after the first strike. Now they're regrouping for a second offensive. Intelligence Director Hana pointed to several key locations. Their supply chains are stretched thin. They never planned for a prolonged conflict. Because they thought we would surrender, said Jae-hyun. A logical assumption based on the damage they inflicted. But they didn't account for human psychology. On the lunar base, Dr. Kyung-ho led a team briefing on the latest weapons development. Scientists and engineers who once created medical equipment and agricultural systems now design tools of war with the same brilliance. The phase disruptor works by targeting the specific frequency of Raxian shield generators, he explained, showing simulation data. It doesn't try to overpower their shields. It simply makes them irrelevant. Dr. Suman added, we've also developed a countermeasure for their gravity weapons. Instead of resisting the gravitational distortion, our hulls now channel and redirect it. One scientist, Dr. Junho Ba, looked troubled. 3 months ago, I was working on cures for genetic diseases. Now I'm designing weapons that could kill millions. Kyung-ho placed a hand on his colleague's shoulder. And when this is over, we'll return to healing. But first, we must survive. The transformation wasn't just in technology, but in society itself. On Earth, children now received military training alongside regular education. Farms had been converted to grow high-yield crops needed for long-term war efforts. Entertainment focused on stories of human resilience and historical victories against overwhelming odds. In what had once been a sports stadium in Seoul, thousands of civilians practiced evacuation drills. The enemy's tendency to target population centers had made civil defense a priority. Move quickly but don't run, instructed Ji Kim, a former teacher now serving as a civil defense coordinator. Keep at least 1 meter between families. A young boy looked up at her. Are the aliens coming here? Ji knelt down. They might try. But this time, we'll be ready for them. The boy nodded solemnly. My dad is building ships to fight them. He says they picked on the wrong species. President Hyunju Park surveyed the changed landscape from her office window. The beautiful parks that had surrounded the government complex were now training grounds. The gleaming skyscrapers had been hardened against orbital bombardment. Madam President, her aide announced, the Council of Scientists is here. 5 of Earth's most brilliant minds entered, led by Dr. Kyung-ho. They carried data tablets and grim expressions. We've completed Project Phoenix, Kyung-ho reported, activating a holographic display. It's ready for deployment. The president studied the schematics of a weapon system unlike anything humanity had built before. You're certain this will work? The principles are sound, he confirmed. We've tested components separately. This applies Ordani shield technology in reverse. Instead of keeping energy out, it focuses it inward to create a controlled implosion. A planet killer, the president said quietly. A last resort, Kyung-ho corrected. But yes, it could render a world uninhabitable. We've built 5. President Park closed her eyes briefly. 3 months ago, we were celebrating our admission to the Galactic Confederation. Now we're building weapons that could destroy worlds. They forced this transformation, said Dr. Suman. Every weapon we've created is adapted from technology they used against us first. In orbit above Jupiter, the newly commissioned battle group prepared for its first mission. 10 ships, each incorporating technology that hadn't existed at the start of the war, formed a perfect formation. Captain Te Wu Xin, commanding the flagship EDF Vengeance, addressed his crew. 3 months ago, we lost friends and family to an enemy that thought we would break. Instead, we have become something new, something they cannot predict or understand. On his command screen, the target coordinates appeared. A Raxian supply depot near the edge of human space. It would be humanity's first offensive action since the war began. Launch in 30 minutes, he ordered. Send one final message to Earth Command. Operation Retribution is commencing. As the ships engaged their newly developed stealth drives, an Ordani observation post failed to detect them passing within range. The first the enemy would know of humanity's transformation would be when the attack came. Swift, unexpected, and unlike anything their military doctrine had prepared them for. The hunted had become the hunters. Counselor Merrivax could not comprehend the data before her. 6 months into what should have been a swift subjugation campaign, the coalition forces were in retreat across every front. "This is impossible," she hissed, her crystalline form pulsing with distress as she addressed the emergency council session. These humans had no quantum torpedo technology before the conflict. The Raxian High Commander Greg's mandibles clicked nervously. Their adaptation rate defies all precedent. They've developed countermeasures to systems they had never encountered before the war. The holographic display showed the human counter-offensive, swift, brutal, and utterly unexpected. The coalition had lost 67 capital ships in the past week alone. Across the galaxy, on the bridge of the EDF Vengeance, Admiral Yunjin Wang watched as her fleet surrounded the Ordani homeworld. "They're broadcasting a surrender signal," Admiral reported Captain Tu Wuxin. "The planetary defense grid is powering down." Yunjin studied the beautiful azure world below, home to billions of civilians who had never chosen this war. The targeting solutions for their major cities flashed on her display. A simple command would reduce them to ash. She thought of New Buzan, of the millions of human lives snuffed out without warning or mercy. "Stand down weapons," she ordered finally. "Inform them their unconditional surrender is accepted. No civilian targets will be engaged." Tewu looked surprised. "After what they did to our colonies." "We are not them," Yunjin replied firmly. "That's why we'll win this war." The Raxian flagship Invincible Claw drifted dead in space, its engines destroyed by weapons the ship's designers had never imagined facing. On the command deck, Grand Admiral Keck watched in horror as the human fleet emerged from jump points all around them. The black ships seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, making them look like holes cut into the fabric of space itself. "All batteries, open fire," he ordered, his mandibles clicking in panic. The Raxian weapons launched, energy beams stabbing out at the human vessels. But the beams simply bent around their targets, redirected by the very technology the Raxians had used in their first attack on human colonies. "Sir, they're not even trying to evade," reported his weapons officer. On the main view screen, Keck watched as the human ships closed in, their formation perfect. When they fired, it wasn't with beam weapons or missiles, but with something new. Ripples in space-time that caused Raxian ships to fold in on themselves, crushed by their own mass. In the Confederation Council chamber, chaos reigned. Representatives from neutral species demanded answers as reports flooded in of human fleets striking deep into coalition territory. "We must sue for peace immediately," urged the delegate from Vols, a species known for its diplomatic skills. "The humans have demonstrated capabilities far beyond our intelligence estimates." Counselor Merrivax's crystalline form flashed with angry colors. "They are still primitives. This is simply not possible." The ancient administrator, Vexlor, rose slowly from his seat, his 4 eyes fixed on the Ordani counselor. "I warned you 6 months ago. There are species in this galaxy that do not respond to aggression as expected. Humanity appears to be one of them. A junior aide rushed into the chamber, his scales pale with fear. Counselors, we've just received word. The humans have reached Ordania Prime. Their fleet has surrounded the homeworld. Silence fell over the assembly. Ordania Prime was deep in Confederation space, protected by defense stations and fleet contingents. For humans to reach it meant they had broken through multiple lines of defense. How? Whispered Marivax. How did they advance so quickly? The answer came as footage appeared on the chamber's main display. Human ships using a jump technology that allowed them to bypass normal space entirely, appearing directly in orbit around their targets. The technology had been theoretical in Confederation science, deemed too dangerous and unpredictable to develop. On Earth, President Hyunju Park received the news in the war room beneath Geneva. The holographic display showed human forces advancing across Confederation space, reclaiming lost colonies and pushing deep into enemy territory. The Raxian Third Fleet has surrendered near Saturn, reported Admiral Jaehyun. Their commander is requesting terms. President Park nodded. Accept their surrender. Treat their wounded. Show them that humanity remembers how to be merciful, even if they never learned. General Minji pointed to another sector on the display. The Ordeni are falling back to their core worlds. Their defense strategy relies on technology we've now neutralized. And what of their allies? Asked the president. The minor species are abandoning the coalition. Several have already reached out through neutral channels, claiming they were coerced into joining the attack on our colonies. In orbit around Ordania Prime, Admiral Yunjin Huang stood on the bridge of the EDF Vengeance, facing a difficult decision. Her fleet had the planet completely surrounded. The Ordeni defense grid, once considered impenetrable, had been disabled by human countermeasures. We have targeting solutions for all major population centers, reported her weapons officer. The phase disruptors can penetrate their planetary shields. Captain Taewoo brought up images on a side screen. The burning ruins of New Bizan colony, habitat domes shattered, millions of civilians exposed to the vacuum of space without warning. They showed no mercy to our people, he said quietly. Why should we show any to theirs? Yunjin studied the beautiful blue-green world below. Unlike Earth, Ordania Prime had never known total war. Its cities were built for beauty, not defense. Its people had never experienced the horror they had so casually inflicted on human colonies. Send a message to their leadership, she ordered. They have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally, or we will begin orbital bombardment. Within minutes, the Ordani Supreme Council sent their response. Complete, unconditional surrender. As Yunjin's ships moved into position to accept the formal surrender, she received a private communication from Earth. President Park's face appeared on her screen. Admiral, I understand you now have the Ordani homeworld at your mercy. Yes, Madam President. They've surrendered. We could occupy their world within hours. And their civilian population. Untouched, as per your standing orders. The President nodded, her expression solemn. There are those among our military who believe we should do to them what they did to us. An eye for an eye. What are your orders, Madam President? Show them who we really are, Admiral. Not who they forced us to become during this war, but who we choose to be in victory. Accept their surrender, but ensure they understand. Any further aggression will not be met with the same mercy. As landing craft descended to the Ordani capital, the supreme leader of their empire waited in the Grand Plaza. Zorax Fall had never imagined this day would come, his species surrendering to what they had considered primitives mere months ago. The human delegation was led by Admiral Gunjin herself. She walked unarmed across the plaza, her uniform bearing the insignia of Earth, but no visible weapons. Supreme Leader Vol, she said, her translator converting her words to the musical Ordani language. I am authorized to accept your surrender on behalf of humanity. Vol lowered his crystalline form in the Ordani gesture of submission. We underestimated your species, Admiral. A mistake we will not make again. No, she agreed. You won't. Because from this day forward, The Ordani Empire exists only by humanity's consent. Your military will be disbanded, your weapons technology confiscated. Your worlds will remain under human protection until a new confederation can be formed, one that respects the rights of all species, not just the oldest or most powerful. And our people? Asked Vol, fearing the worst. Will live, Yunjin said simply. We are not you. When we said we fought to defend, not to conquer, we meant it. Even now, after all you've done. As news of the Ordani surrender spread across the galaxy, the remaining coalition forces began to collapse. The Raxian High Command, seeing what had happened to their allies, offered unconditional surrender rather than face the human fleet. In the council chamber, Administrator Vex Lore addressed the stunned representatives. Let this be a lesson to all species of the Confederation. The capacity for violence is not the same as the desire for it. Humanity defended itself with terrible efficiency, but chose mercy in victory. That is a sign of true civilization, one we would all do well to remember. 1 year after the last coalition forces surrendered, the rebuilt Galactic Confederation Council chamber fell silent as Ambassador Taehyun Park once again took the central podium. Now, however, the human stood not as a representative of a minor species, but as the elected High Counselor of the reformed Confederation. Today we ratify the Galactic Charter of Sentient Rights, he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. Never again will established powers conspire to destroy emerging civilizations out of fear or greed. The new Security Council, comprising humans and representatives from the coalition species, nodded in solemn agreement. The war had left deep scars across a dozen worlds, but the peace that followed proved unexpected to many who had feared human vengeance. In the Grand Archives beneath the council chambers, Dr. Ju Kim made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the academic community. Ancient records, previously restricted by the former council leadership, revealed that humans weren't the first sleeping giants to face unprovoked aggression. 3 extinct civilizations have followed similar patterns, but unlike humanity, they had not survived. On the newly established Remembrance Plaza outside the council headquarters, workers completed a monument inscribed with a simple message in all Confederation languages. They were warned. Colonel Dodium Lee, now Confederation Security Director, stood beside Juwoo as they observed the monument's unveiling. Do you think they understand now? She asked quietly. Do-Hyun watched as representatives from across the galaxy, including former enemies, gathered in peaceful cooperation. I think they're learning the most important lesson, which is that humanity's greatest strength isn't our capacity for war, he said. It's our capacity for forgiveness, but only after justice is served. Across the rebuilt Confederation, a new phrase entered the lexicon of every spacefaring species: to awaken the humans, a cautionary warning against catastrophic misjudgment. The new Confederation headquarters shone in the light of the twin suns. Built on a neutral world, it represented the fresh start that all species had agreed was necessary. The great dome of the council chamber was made of transparent material that showed the stars above, a reminder of what united them all. Taehyun Park walked through the gardens that surrounded the complex. Plants from 100 worlds grew together in carefully designed harmony, including trees from Earth and flora from the Ordeni and Raxian homeworlds. High Counselor, called a voice behind him. Taehyun turned to see Vex Lore, the ancient alien who had tried to warn the old council before the war. Administrator, Taehyun greeted him with a respectful bow. I'm pleased you accepted a position in the new government. Some wisdom should survive, even as systems change. The old alien said, I have lived long enough to see empires rise and fall. But never have I seen a species win a war so completely, then use that victory as you humans have. They walked together along the garden path. In the distance, representatives from dozens of species gathered for the historic ratification ceremony. Many expected us to establish a human empire, Taehyun said, to rule over those who attacked us. It would have been the normal course of events, agreed Vex Lore. The Ordani Empire rose by conquering those who challenged them. The Raxian hegemony as well. Victory traditionally means domination. Not for us, said Taeyun. At least, not this time. In the rebuilt colony of New Buzan, survivors gathered to watch the ratification ceremony via holographic projection. The colony had been reconstructed with help from all Confederation species, including former enemies. The new habitat domes were stronger, built with Ordeni shield technology freely shared as part of the peace settlement. Governor Subin Kang, who had survived the initial attack by chance, addressed the gathered colonists. 1 year ago, we learned the cost of being unprepared in a dangerous galaxy. Today, we help create a new order that will prevent such attacks from happening again. To any species. A young girl raised her hand. But what if someone breaks the rules? Subin smiled gently. Then they will face justice from all of us together, not just humanity. That's what the new Confederation means. On Earth, President Hyunju Park watched the ceremony from her office in Geneva. The war had changed her, as it had changed all of humanity. Her hair showed more gray than a year ago, her face more lines. But there was pride in her eyes as she watched Taeyun take his place as leader of the new order. They looked nervous, noted Admiral Jaeyun, watching the alien representatives on screen. Even now, they fear us. As they should, said General Minji. We could have destroyed them completely. But we didn't, the president reminded them. And that is why they follow us now, not out of fear alone, but respect. In the archives beneath the council building, Dr. Ju Kim carefully translated ancient records with the help of Dr. Sumin Kang. The documents they'd discovered were shocking. Detailed accounts of 3 previous species who had faced coalition attacks like the one launched against Earth. The Vellani were the first, Ju said, studying the holographic text. Their technology was promising but still developing when they were attacked. They fought back but couldn't adapt quickly enough. And the others? Asked Sumin. The Trellix and the Corvin. Both showed signs of rapid adaptation under threat. Both were deemed too dangerous to allow development by the old council. Sumin looked troubled. So we weren't the first, just the first to survive.